We may look like we're in love here with this while we're starting out.
Look, I'm Joe Biden.
Oh, I guess we got to start our little deal on it.
When you talk about Joe Biden, you have to talk about which era Joe Biden, by the way, because they are very different.
The hairless era or the hair era?
Exactly, that's right.
Pre-hair or post-hair?
The anti-affirmative action Joe Biden or the...
All right. 3, 2, 1. The opioid settlement intrigue continues. Brillbeck's been reporting on it, and he's here right now. It's Mitchell Talks, the News 9 Sessions with Aaron Brillbeck and Majority Leader John Nichols. All right. 3.
Over there.
Right here?
Center.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hey, look who we got. We got the leader.
We know this guy.
Yeah. You've been reporting your tail off, as they say down in Garvin County, on this issue. Bring us up to date, and he's all yours.
This is an interesting issue. I'm going to beat you up a little bit on this one.
You got it.
Because you and I disagree a bit on this one. This is a $270 million settlement, opioid settlement, by Attorney General Mike Hunter. A lot of the problems that I'm seeing with this, well, $60 million is going to outside attorneys. Only $12 million of this is going towards really actually helping communities outside of Tulsa with opioid addiction. Roughly $200 million of this is going up to a center at OSU, and we still have no idea exactly what that center is going to be doing. There's been zero transparency as far as this is concerned. The Attorney General has circumvented the state legislature, not consulted with you, not consulted with the governor in terms of how this settlement's going to work, and then set up this outside bridge organization that's going to be overseeing the money. They're not elected officials. What's your take on all this?
Well, my first take is almost everything you said I agree with. One of the things that happened, I am proud that we got the settlement. I'm glad that we got it from Purdue. You hit several issues. I mean, there's not enough money going to cities and counties. Cities and counties carried the brunt of the damages. They carried the brunt of having to deal with this, especially with 780 passing. It repacked our county jails and helped us some with our DOC, but made a lot of things that were felonies, misdemeanors. So that means they're in the county jails. A lot of our incarceration problem was opioid dependence, and then other things that happen as a result of opioid dependence. And I've been pretty upfront about I have some concerns with both where the money is going, and so viewers understand the money is eventually going to go to OSU. But before it goes to OSU, there's another foundation that's going to receive the money, but that foundation hasn't been created. So we have $107 million we just got. And there's a bridge organization, I'm not quite sure what that is, of people who are overseeing it. It's the director of the OSU Medical Center, the editor of the Daily Oklahoman, and Howard, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name, Bob Howard,
Yep.
who are excellent Oklahomans
Yes.
and wonderful people. But I've got some concerns that the same person that's supposed to eventually receive the money at OSU is now looking over it. I've got some concerns that it's $107 million of taxpayer dollar, and there doesn't appear to be any real oversight. Remember, these are damages for the state of Oklahoma. And I think I'm not being inconsistent when I say, way to go, Attorney General Hunter, very excited we got the settlement, but at the same time saying, I have concerns with how the money is being spent and who's looking over it.
But is it a bravo Attorney General when we've got $260 million, $270 million that we can't touch, that isn't going directly to helping the victims, but is going towards setting up a huge tax shelter for the people responsible for a lot of deaths?
Well, and that's one of the things that's important to note. It is a tax-deductible donation. That's essentially why the foundation is being created. So the Sackler family can then be tax-deductible in what they give. You know, is it the way I would have set it up? No. It's very difficult to second-guess him, and I don't want to be too defensive of General Hunter. I mean, I wasn't the one that put this thing together. But we've got to figure out what we're going to do now. I think the legislature or someone with accountability has got to get control over that money. We can't change where the money goes in the settlement. The money is going to go to OSU. But some of the concerns that I've been reaching out right now, for example, inside the settlement, if the money is misappropriated or not spent in accordance with the settlement, the state of Oklahoma is on the hook to pay that money back. There's also going to be challenges to the legality of this settlement. Those things are going to come. The legislature is not going to bring that challenge to the legality, but those are coming. That money has to stay in that bridge organization. Giving that money to OSU does put direct tax dollars at risk. The temptation when you have the person finally receiving the money to be on the bridge organization. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't think there are proper safeguards put up to make sure the money is spent. Not that the legislature can redirect the money. I mean, we don't have that ability anymore. And I would never support, and I think there should be legislation to avoid a settlement like this in the future that doesn't occur. I understand the general's point. Purdue was close to bankruptcy. His view was he got the money because if he didn't, Purdue would have had it. This isn't about second guessing, for me at least. It's not about second guessing the general. What it's about saying is we don't have proper safeguards on that money and we need to make sure we have them.
But we have to kind of second guess them. The statute that regulates settlements like this is pretty clear. I'll read it to you. He's required to pay into the state treasury upon its receipt all monies received by the Attorney General belonging to the state. His argument is, well, technically I didn't receive it. It's going to be received by this organization that I'm setting up and they have no idea what they're doing yet. I'm going to be controlling them, but I didn't technically receive. How is that transparent?
Well, I don't think that is transparent. And I don't think that, again, I wouldn't have settled the case this way. The other thing is the legislature was not consulted whatsoever. I found out about it. I did get a call from the general, which I'm very grateful for, 30 minutes beforehand. He left me a message. We weren't able to talk, but by 30 minutes beforehand, I mean 30 minutes before the press conference, when the public found out about it. The new change to the opioid settlement litigation, I found out about it from the press conference the general has. He has no requirement to tell the legislature. I think that law is pretty clear. It's not the way I would have done this. But at the same time, I feel like as a legislator, and I've said this to our younger legislators, we're moving forward with the several stages of grief. First there's angry, then there's denial, and eventually you got to get to acceptance. This was settled the way it was settled. I can't stress this enough. Not the way I would have settled it. I would have been far more transparent in who I told, but it was. What we have to do now as a legislature, in my opinion, is move forward. Now, does the media need to second guess this? Yes. I think that needs to happen, just as the media should second guess anything we do. But at this point, the legislature is responsible if, number one, this happens again, or number two, we don't take moves to get control over that money, to get oversight. And I don't mean control. It's already going to OSU. Nothing's going to change. But we have to have oversight. One of the things that gets lost as we're second guessing the settlement is that the same individual who's going to receive the money is now in control of the money. And I haven't heard anybody say they're not going to give it away, that they're not going to immediately spend it. OSU was making phone calls to hire people the day after the settlement announcement was made. That is irresponsible. We cannot be irresponsible with these, which are now taxpayer dollars. And why do I say that? Because it was damages that were caused by these manufacturers, caused to taxpayers. That's state money. So and it's not a power grab too. We want to be real careful. There's not a power struggle between whether or not the legislature should control it. I'm on the second half of my legislative service. This isn't about me. I'm thinking about what this building's going to be like when I'm gone. There's a reason we have separation of powers. It's the job of the legislature to appropriate the money. Why? Because if you don't like how we do it, you can fire us. Mm-hmm. It's the job of the executive to enforce the laws. We've got some real issues right now with how that money is being spent and, frankly, how it's being watched over.
But here's the problem. Now there's a judgment, so you don't have any say. The legislature has no say. You're done.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt. We cannot change the money. And I've had to send that to constituents. The only option the legislature would have is to go in and attack the judgment and attack the ability and say we need to set this whole thing aside. That probably would have catastrophic consequences. If Purdue were to declare bankruptcy, we would get $0. It also could forestall the lawsuit that's going on. So from the legislature's standpoint, the ability of attacking the judgment, that doesn't make sense. That looks like a power grab. I think we need to be wise. I say all the time, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. But there's at the end of this, we do have a duty to make sure this doesn't happen again. I also think the legislature should set up a specific fund for these opioid settlements. And the general agrees with this, by the way, should set up a specific fund for these opioid settlements where the money goes through. I think the legislature should put forth the board of directors on the foundation that is giving the money to OSU. And by the way, inside the settlement, OSU creates a board of advisors that is picked by OSU.
Right.
I mean, there is absolutely no oversight on the National Center because the person receiving the money, the person receiving the money on the highest level, the person getting the money on the final level, and then the people overseeing the money are all picked by the same people. There's a real issue there, and we're going to have to find a way to get control of that. And again, I trust the individuals involved now. I'm on the tail end of my legislative service. It's our job to set up systems when there are new individuals, that the systems work, that there's openness, that there's transparency. And we also have to be concerned with people's view of government. We have to be concerned as a government that we are viewed as open and transparent and caring for the people. That's when we make these decisions. That's why this is such a hard position for the legislature to be in. Because while, again, I agree with you, going on and attacking the general or going on and attacking the underlying lawsuit from the legislator's perspective, it doesn't get us anywhere, and it almost distracts us from what we need to do. Doesn't mean I disagree that there should be attacks on the judge.
Can I ask about something you just said? The general said this thing's bankruptcy proof. What I just heard you say is, if they go in, now the first defense was, well, they told us they weren't. Well, you know these people. You've all read the stories. This ain't exactly like you're dealing with mom and pa kettle here, okay?
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
They're not good people.
Number two, if they bankrupt this thing, I mean, bankruptcy's a right. Play my lawyer here on this one, okay? That's a right you have to declare bankruptcy. If they do this, and they were threatening to do it, what happens to the settlement?
Yeah, so I both play a lawyer on TV and sometimes I play one in the courtroom. Yeah. So I am a lawyer too. The general did do a good job. It is as bankruptcy proof as you can get.
But not absolute.
And nothing's absolute. I mean, we all know the difference between God and a federal judge. God doesn't think he's a federal judge.
Yeah.
I mean, when you cannot be fired for anything other than treason, that's a lot of authority. Now, we have incredible federal judges, and that's not a knock on any of them, but they make the decisions that they want to make. So when somebody goes to bankruptcy court, there's a whole series of laws that they have available to them, and that federal judge is not bound by this decision by the state court judge. Now, that being said, the general got letters of credit, got some backing from some banks in case they filed bankruptcy. My fear is not really bankruptcy, because I think the state did a really good job of making this as bankruptcy proof as a judgment can be. My fear is a collateral attack that's already been filed by, say, the cities or by somebody else, a collateral attack.
They're not very happy, right? I mean,
they're not happy.
Okay,
Yeah, they feel like they didn't get enough money.
Okay.
My fear is a collateral attack on the legitimacy of the judgment, saying you can't do it this way, citing the law you just cited, and saying this isn't something we can do. I will tell you, I think if the legislature gets control of the foundation and has appointees, then it's much more likely the way he did it is constitutional. I think that would actually help our ability to keep this money, which is why I'm pushing for that legislation so hard. It's not to be adversarial with the general, it's to be helpful to get that done. But in the event of that collateral attack saying this judgment, you can't do it the way you did it, that's when we would have to then pay the money back. Well, if that money is already spent, if OSU has already kicked that down, or the foundation has kicked, if the bridge group has kicked it to the foundation, who's kicked it all the way down on the ATM machine.
And it's gone.
And it's gone, that means we're looking at coming up with $107 million of taxpayer money. So what's wise is to just hold on to it. Do I think it's going to get overturned? Of course not. I don't think that's going to happen. But that's why you want elected officials on there, because we would be responsible if it does get overturned. We have to make that decision that we're going to hold on to it for a little while.
Could I do a hypothetical? I know you hate hypotheticals. But we know what the general said. He said it last week on our segment, which you can see at news9.com/your vote counts. There. Great piece by Aaron Brillbeck. And two great stories this week, by the way, on what you do. But a hypothetical. They were moving forward, and the general stressing they could file bankruptcy. And it seemed to be we were hurry up to get this done. Wouldn't it be right because he's complaining about transparency, and it ain't exactly see-through glass right now. And I've got sources telling me, man, that some of the freshman members, there was just chaos behind the scenes out there, right? A lot of people are really unhappy here. Wouldn't it be great just to get the OSU president and Dr. Strum, some people, and sit down and go, let's just work our way backwards on this thing, because people like Aaron Brillbeck and citizens are going, what's going on? There's way too much behind the scenes.
I agree, and we're finding out things for the first time. I mean, this bridge organization, Aaron, you were the one that told me about it. We were at the Capitol. I just got done presenting one of the rape task force bills in committee. We walked outside and said, what do you think about this bridge organization for the opioid settlement? And I said, what are you talking about? Like, I had no idea. We are trying to get that information. We have had meetings where that information wasn't given to us at the time. There are a lot of missteps that are going on. You know, if I could go back in time, all had to happen is get permission from the judge to tell the legislature about it. We probably would have ran some legislation, approved this type of a settlement, and buttoned this whole thing down. It'd be over. We'd be
But
done.
there's nothing
It'd be
keeping
buttoned
you
up.
guys from like everybody pulling back a little bit.
What does keep us from pulling back on everything, though, is let's say the legislature were to file a lawsuit and say, you can't do this. You still run that risk of Purdue filing bankruptcy, which would do two things. It would take away all the settlement money away that we received, and number two, it would forestall this lawsuit that's going forward in May. There is a lot more money out there. I mean, the big defendants are still in this suit. The issue, again, that's why what the end result was is probably good at the end of the day. How it went about it, though, leaves it subject to a lot of collateral attack, and afterwards not having some oversight over that money, and I mean real oversight. We have excellent people that are over it, but we have and frankly, I'll say this because other members are afraid to say it, having a member of the media over that oversight board, talk about a hammer over the legislature, and I don't think that was on accident. I don't think having an editor of the Daily Oklahoman that isn't set up to intimidate members. If you could weaponize the media in order to get something done, that's not something that should happen. That's not appropriate. It's not appropriate that we should have, and frankly, I would hope that we wouldn't have editorials one way or another on this if we have somebody who's now over the information.
That was not a good decision.
shouldn't.
That was not a good decision.
And it takes away, it even puts me in an awkward situation. I was supportive of General Hunter. I think he's an excellent attorney general. I'm defending something that's not the way I would have done it because I do believe his heart is in the right place. But the missteps that are occurring at this puts the state of Oklahoma at risk. That's the bottom line. And nobody has stood forward on that bridge organization and said, by the way, we're not going to spend the money. I've said this at least 10 times in interviews, what I'm saying now. Greg Treat has said that over and over again. Terry O'Donnell has said that over and over again. It would also be helpful if somebody were to step in, which is why I'm calling for legislation that's being drafted right now. We're passing it around that says, and it's not going to be anti-general. It's going to be general, great job. We want this money. We want this thing at OSU. We want it to be a shining beacon, but we have to be wise about how we do it. And for these collateral attacks, creating this legislation that has some oversight that we're not giving these dollars away to creates a whole nother set of problems. If there's no legislative oversight anywhere, creates a whole other constitutional problem. We actually make it less likely to be collaterally attacked. It's one of the dangers of being the legislature and being a lawyer. I have to think that way sometimes. I want this to stick. I want OSU. I want to talk to you 4 years from now and talk about the statue we're going to build to Mike Hunter because we have an incredible facility at OSU. But if we don't take the proper steps, if we don't look over that money the way we're supposed to be looked at, this could just easily go down a disastrous road. And when I look at it for legislators, some of the ways it's being set up, there are some red flags. And I think those red flags can be fixed without having an internal fight, which is why, again, I'm so careful. I think there's a disagreement. It's because sometimes in the media, not you guys, but the media in general, they want to set it up as one side or the other. You're for somebody or you're against somebody. No, I can say I'm glad he's our attorney general. I can say I'm glad he made a tough call in a hard situation, and I support that, and I can still be critical of the call and say, here's the things I think we need to do to fix it. We want to elevate that level of political discourse.
Fair enough.
Wow. Okay. Remember the noise that Roger Rabbit made? Yeah, this is what this is. This is a Roger Rabbit noise. Leader, thank you very much.
Thank you.
By the way, how long will it take to get this wrapped up?
We're going to have to get agreement between the House and the Senate, but the House is ready to run some legislation that I think would help everybody. We're one branch of the three-legged stool. When we get agreement, I think we're going to roll it out. And I think if we work together, by the way, so let's go to the future. If we work arm in arm, General, House, Senate, Governor, we could still move forward and do what is best for the state of Oklahoma. We have an incredible opportunity here. I would call on everybody, let's go grab it. Let's do it together.
But transparently.
Absolutely.
If. Well, anyway, what's I was saying? If ifs and nuts were candy and nuts, what a Merry Christmas we'd have. Hey, thanks for watching Mitchell Talks, the News 9 sessions with Aaron Brillback. See this again at news9.com/your old accounts. Follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @Mitchell Talks.